स्टडी IQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।
हेलो एंड नमस्ते। आज हम एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग से टॉपिक पे डिस्कस करने वाले हैं। मेरे पीछे लगे फोटो में ऐसे दो दिलचस्प वर्ल्ड लीडर्स हैं जिनके बारे में आजकल काफी चर्चा चल रही है। एक तरफ है व्लादिमीर पुतिन जो रशिया के प्रीमियर हैं, और दूसरी तरफ है मोहम्मद बिन सलमान अल सऊद, द क्राउन प्रिंस ऑफ सऊदी अरेबिया। इंटरनेशनल न्यूज में ये कहा जा रहा है कि इज मोहम्मद बिन सलमान द नेक्स्ट व्लादिमीर पुतिन। इसका क्वेश्चन का if we just take a look at the question, we'll understand that Putin, who is considered as the disruptor of the world order, Putin, who has challenged US hegemony since his arrival in Russian politics, Putin जिन्होंने इतने सारे wars किए हैं और तभी भी आज तक कोई पनिशमेंट नहीं मिला है उनको, ऐसा ही क्या दूसरा लीडर आ रहा है जियोपॉलिटिक्स में? Is Mohammed bin Salman the next Putin in geopolitics? यही क्वेश्चन पे आज हम थोड़ा गौर करने वाले हैं। But before we go on to understand this question, I want to begin this discussion with a cricket analogy. So ऑस्ट्रेलिया में एक काफी फेमस विकेट कीपर बैट्समैन थे, एडम गिलक्रिस्ट। आपने सभी ने उनका नाम सुना ही होगा। सो एडम गिलक्रिस्ट को पूछा जा रहा था, ये इंटरव्यू उस समय की है जब MS धोनी वाज राइजिंग एज अ विकेट कीपर बैट्समैन इन इंडियन क्रिकेट, और उनसे पूछा गया था कि इज MS धोनी द नेक्स्ट एडम गिलक्रिस्ट, एंड ही हैड सेड दैट नो, MS धोनी इज द फर्स्ट MS धोनी। So in other words, when there is a rise of a leader, it doesn't necessarily mean that he is stepping into the shoes of someone. चलिए टॉपिक पे वापस चलते हैं। तो व्लादिमीर पुतिन और मोहम्मद बिन सलमान के बीच में एक बहुत ही स्ट्रॉन्ग कनेक्शन है, वो है अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म का। व्हाट इज अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म? अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म इज बेसिकली अ पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम जहां पे जो लीडर होता है वो कोई भी और ऑपोजिशन नहीं रहने देता है। सो देयर इज बेसिकली नो पॉलिटिकल प्लूरलिज्म। he or she ensures that कि उनका पार्टी या the leadership is completely legitimized by the people. There is no opposition, there is no anti-regime activities, nothing like that. दूसरी चीज बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म में कि जो पावर है वो हमेशा लाइज, फियर एंड इकोनॉमिक प्रॉस्पेरिटी से ही इंश्योर की जाती है। दैट इज देयर इज नो चैलेंज टू दैट पावर, एंड पावर हमेशा एक्सपैंड किया जाता है थ्रू वेरियस एग्जीक्यूटिव मूव्स। अभी चलते हैं समझने के लिए कि फीचर्स क्या हैं ऐसे अथॉरिटेरियन स्टेट का। तो जुआन जे लिंस की किताब में, दैट इज टाइटल्ड एज टोटलिटेरियन एंड अथॉरिटेरियन रेजिम्स, ही हैज गिवन 4 बेसिक फीचर्स ऑफ एन अथॉरिटेरियन स्टेट। अब पहला है कि लिमिटेड पॉलिटिकल प्लूरलिज्म, दैट इज कोई भी ऑपोजिशन नहीं है। It is one party, one leadership, and that is all that matters. अगर opposition होता भी है वो सिर्फ नाम के लिए है। It's a very limited pluralism that we are talking about. दूसरा है कि political legitimacy जो है, that is people is accepting the governance, that is always based on appeals to emotion, that is emotions of fear, emotions of national pride. ऐसे कहा जाता है कि जो अथॉरिटेरियन लीडर है वो हमेशा पावर में इसलिए रहता है क्योंकि वो लोगों को यही बोलता है कि मेरे अलावा कोई और लीडर आ ही नहीं सकता है। आई एम द बेस्ट दैट द कंट्री कैन एवर गेट, आई एम द बेस्ट दैट द कंट्री नीड्स राइट नाउ। तो ये जो इमोशनल अपील है, इसके वजह से देयर इज अ पॉलिटिकल लेजिटिमेसी एंड द गवर्नमेंट कंटिन्यूज। तीसरा फीचर है सप्रेशन ऑफ एंटी रेजिम एक्टिविटीज, दैट इज कोई भी प्रोटेस्ट नहीं, कोई भी क्वेश्चनिंग नहीं, ऐसा कोई एक्टिविटी नहीं जिसके ऊपर यू कैन आस्क एनी काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चन, क्रिटिसाइज द गवर्नमेंट, नथिंग लाइक दैट। सो देयर इज नो एंटी रेजिम एक्टिविटीज, कोई भी प्रोटेस्ट भी नहीं हो सकता है। सो इमेजिन। फोर्थ फीचर इज बेसिकली एक्सपेंशन ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव पावर्स। जो भी अथॉरिटेरियन लीडर होगा वो धीरे धीरे यही कोशिश करेगा कि उनका जो पावर है it continues after the term as well. So either through an executive order or either through any institutional framework, the authoritarian leader is always going to ensure that his or her power continues. सो अगर एग्जाम्पल्स की तरह देखें, आज की दुनिया में देर आर मल्टीपल अथॉरिटेरियन कंट्रीज सच एज रशिया, सच एज चाइना, सऊदी अरेबिया, बहरीन, सीरिया एंड सो मेनी मोर. तो अब चलते हैं कंपैरिजन की तरफ. तो इसके लिए वी हैव टू फर्स्ट अंडरस्टैंड कि प्यूतिन का राइज कैसे होता है. अब अगर हम प्यूतिन का राइज, वी हैव टू डेट इट बैक. We have to start from the time that he was an intelligence officer in Russian USSR intelligence agency that was known as KGB. अब उस समय में he had already been about 15 to 16 years का service already हो चुका था उनका when the collapse of USSR actually took place. So this is somewhere around 1991 की कहानी हम बता रहे हैं. 1991 जब collapse of USSR होता है, so that time he leaves his intelligence service and moves towards politics. At this point of time, Russia was being governed by Boris Yeltsin. And under Boris Yeltsin, Putin starts working in different departments. One of the departments was the Security Council of Russia as well. तो वहां पे he starts rising in political power, and in 1999, when suddenly Boris Yeltsin resigns, उस समय में Putin actually becomes the acting president. And in the year 2000, जब election होता है, he becomes the president of Russia. And तब से लेके आज तक कहीं ना कहीं is always held the power का strings of Russia. He has always held it. So in the year 2000, when he comes to power, he plays on the economic ideology. He talks about how to economically grow Russia. He says that the collapse of USSR is the biggest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century, and he blames it on communism. So what he does is he opens up the Russian economy and assures 7% average growth per year. He also starts tapping into the Russian oil and gas market, and he ensures that it becomes the primary thing that Russian economy can actually have a boost on. Apart from that, he also talks about technological growth. He talks about opening up further market, industries, and so on and so forth. तो इससे क्या होता है कि रशिया का economy, it actually opens up and gets a huge boost. So people are very happy. The Russian people are very happy with Putin's presidency. But at the same time, he also wages the Second Chechnya War. And the Second Chechnya War mein, he declares that Chechnya is an integral part of Russia, but there is some scope of giving autonomy, some sort of autonomy to the Chechens. In other words, he raises the question of territorial integrity. He assures the Russian people that as a leader, I will not let anything harm Russian interests, and I will continue to expand those interests. Soon after, his second term begins as a president. That is in 2008 to 2012. And similar growth is also observed in this term. He actually starts engaging with political leaders like Merkel from Germany, US ke leadership ke saath, and basically reclaims the glory of USSR that had actually collapsed after the Cold War. So basically, he was trying to push forward the idea of Russia as a superpower, Russia as a challenger to US hegemony. 2012 mein things change because according to the Russian constitution, a president can hold power for 2 terms. So in 2012, when the elections take place, things are not in favor of Putin. But he becomes the prime minister under the Medvedev government. And even as a prime minister, he continues to make policies for Russia. 4 साल बाद जब फिर से election होता है, he comes back as a president. And the moment he comes back as a president, there is charges of corruption against him, जिसके वजह से anti-corruption protests होते हैं. And this slowly becomes an anti-Putin protest in Moscow. He cracks down on the protests, and he makes the situation in such a way that the protesters were seen by the Russian people, the large Russian people, that these protesters were being controlled by external forces. He starts blaming the Western countries in interfering into Russian politics. And by that, he again gains his popularity. Soon after, he goes into war and annexes Crimea. Where is Crimea? Crimea is the small piece of land that gives access to Russia to the Black Sea. A very similar reason why Russia is fighting with Ukraine, because Black Sea is an important asset for Russia. इसके ऊपर बाद में चर्चा करेंगे, but you have to first understand कि क्रीमिया के annexation के वजह से he could again claim that, look, I have done so much for Russian national interest. This is a warm port and this is crucial for Russia's trade. So, with the war again of annexation of Crimea, he then goes into intervening or interfering into the Syrian case, wherein as a mediator, as a superpower, Russia intervenes in the Syrian civil war. And from there onwards, Russia starts meddling into the Middle Eastern politics under Putin. So you can see that on one hand, he continues with economic prosperity, and on the other hand, he reclaims back the superpower status of USSR by waging wars, by interfering into other conflicts, and portraying Russia as a mediator. So what he basically delivers to the people of Russia is that there is economic prosperity, and whatever he's doing in the name of reclaiming back USSR's glory. And what happens in this is that people start losing focus on what is important, about their rights, about their freedom, about what is happening in politics. Because once he comes back to power, he ensures that he will continue to be in power. So in 2020, he comes out with an executive order for a constitutional amendment. And the constitutional amendment states that for the next 2 6-year terms, he will continue to be in power. That means from date, he's going to be in power for the next decade or more. So that means there is no political pluralism, there is no independence of people to choose in politics. And that is why he is known as an authoritarian leader. He is known as an autocratic leader as well. Moving on, let's understand MBS and the rise of MBS. Now, Saudi Arabia is a monarchy, and monarchy mein, the way to power is through succession. In Saudi Arabia, the state was basically created or settled by Ibn Saud. He is the first king of Saudi Arabia. And he ruled that whoever came to power after him will be one of his sons. It will not be the grandsons. So basically, all his sons, as per the succession, would have access to political power. Now, he had 45 sons out of his 10 wives, and out of which around 36 lived up to adulthood. Now, out of those 36, 7 brothers who were known as Suderi brothers were the ones who were more interested in political power. And they continued to play games and everything, but the power continued to be amongst the brothers. So from Ibn Saud, it went to the eldest son, and from the son, the power passed from brother to brother. It never went from brother to the grandson, always amongst the brothers. This changed under the current king. So King Salman, he did not appoint his brother as the next successor. Instead, he appointed his son, that is Mohammed bin Salman, as the crown prince. This raised opposition amongst the other brothers and their sons. And this opposition was something that Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, was very careful to handle. So he called it an anti-corruption crackdown. And under this, he removed all opposition. All his brothers, his uncles, his nephews, they were all either killed or put into exile or removed from government duties. Today in Saudi Arabia, there is no one to challenge MBS's rule. He is the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. He is also known as Mr. Everything because all powers in Saudi Arabia emanate from him. Now, let us talk about his authoritarian nature apart from his way to power. So once he came to power, the first thing he did was wage a war in Yemen. He created a GCC coalition, and in that GCC coalition, he declared Saudi Arabia to be the leader of GCC. And this GCC coalition went and interfered again in a civil war in Yemen to bring peace. Then he again went into different issues, conflicts in West Asia, and intervened in these conflicts as a regional power. Further along, there was, of course, the Khashoggi murder case that made international headlines, and he was criticized for it. But politically, inside Saudi Arabia, he has an amazing popularity status. Why? Because he has opted for moderate Islam. He has taken steps to bring in more freedom or give more freedom to people of Saudi Arabia, like lifting the ban on female driving, allowing women to wear uniforms when they go to school rather than abayas, curbing the power of religious police. But even when he's giving those freedom, he's also putting all the human rights activists behind the jail. When the ban on lifting of female driving came in, all female drivers who were protesting, and there was a lot of protesters, they were all put to jail. And the reason he gave was that the decision was to be his alone, not demanded by the people. So something that he portrays as to the people of Saudi Arabia is that all political decisions, all policies, all freedom, rights emerge from him. And he's the one who's going to give it to the people. And this cannot be demanded. So this is how an authoritarian leader in Saudi Arabia functions. So by now you would have understood that there are a lot of similarities between Putin and MBS. Both of them talking about giving freedom and economic prosperity to their own people, but not allowing opposition, continuing to be in power and waging war outside so that their status as a regional power keeps increasing. But there is one big difference. And the difference is that between Putin and MBS is dependent on external powers. MBS is dependent on USA. So when Putin came to power, he came to power wherein USSR had economically collapsed, but it still had technological bandwidth. It still had the capacity to build defense hardwares. And based on this, when he improved the economic condition of Russia could actually take off. Russia was never dependent on any other economy, neither for economy nor for defense. But MBS is not in the same boat. He is dependent for his security, for his defense hardware, even for economy. He's dependent on US because his economy is run by petrodollars. He knows that there will come a time in future when petrol will not be there. And that time he would need to diversify. And that is why he's already taking steps. He's already taking steps to diversify and move towards a non-oil economy. And that is part of his Vision 2030. But there is still a long way to go. There is still a long way to move outside the US influence. He is, of course, looking at Russia and China as probable partners. But dependency itni hai US pe ki this is going to take some time. And with time, you don't know in geopolitics how much of an influence the hegemon can actually have. And that is the reason why one can safely assume that MBS is not the next Putin. He is the first MBS, but not the next Putin. With this, thank you.
StudyIQ IAS. अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।